Good morning, church. It's Reverend Ahmondra coming to you live from Carlsbad, California. I want to take a moment right here, right now, just to remember all of those who've made their transition during the coronavirus. Also, to send out love to those individuals who are experiencing grief, deep grief for those they've lost or for those we've heard about their loss. And I want to acknowledge all of those who are working really, really hard to support us during these times. As a minister, God is forever working in our lives. And one way God works in our lives is to throw curves at us. As a minister, I get a message, I prepare that message, I research that message, and then I'm all set to deliver it. Right before I deliver my message, I go into prayer. And sometimes Spirit decides it wants another message to be delivered. And it gives it to me like, boom, a minute before I am to go onto the podium. And that's perfectly fine. So I get to sit down after this sermon is finished and hear what Spirit has to say. I have the same title, Open Your Heart to God's Grace. That didn't change. But what changed was how that message was going to be delivered. And when this happens in my life as a minister, I know it's because somebody out there or somebody's out there need to hear this message. And so that message comes through me to you this morning. The first thing I want to say is that when I talk about standing and being open to God's grace, I'm talking about that spiritual energy, that power and presence that's always with us. And if you've heard me speak before, you've heard me say this before. But today it's particularly important because many of us are right now waiting to hear about what's going on in the world. What do we do next? Many states are opening. They're lifting the stay-at-home orders. And then some of us are saying, do I stay home? Do I go outside? Do I only go that place? Do I go this place? What is it that I do? And I'm saying that for each and every one of us, there is an answer for us within. It's that power and presence of God's grace when we are able to hear our message for us. And that was the change that I was given today in my message. Because when we stand in God's grace, three things powerfully occur. We gain the courage and the strength to persevere through any challenge that we may face or any situation that we see in the world, like what we're seeing right now. We're always guided to use our creativity in service to others. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that every day. And I have 3 different stories that I want to share today. And they all show us how, when we're opened in our heart to God's grace, power jumps out and it blesses us and the world. The third thing is that when our heart is open, that internal chatter that's always clamoring at us, the volume is lowered. And our faith and the peace within is increased. So the first story that I want to share with you this morning is a story about a gentleman who made an observation. So this gentleman lived in a town, like we all live in a town that's everything's shut down, except some stores and restaurants are doing takeout. So after a couple of weeks, he decided, him and his wife, that they wanted to get some takeout. They were tired of cooking. And so they went out And they ventured out into the community. And they saw one restaurant with a sign in the window. And the sign says, closed. We do not see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's been a great 31 years. And thank you. And the restaurant was closed. And in his heart, he felt really, really sad. And so the next restaurant, the one that they had called the order into, Betty's Barbecue, was open, and their order was sitting out front on the table. And so when they drove up to get the order, he asked Betty, who was standing there to deliver his order, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I'm doing great. This shutdown has forced me to do something that I've always wanted to do and just was too afraid to do, and that's to start a takeout to my restaurant." She said, and so I started a takeout, and we're doing a booming business. So he asked her, "Well, what about your employees?" And she was saying, "I'm so busy that I put my employees to work in the kitchen. So I didn't have to let them go." So he got his barbecue and he left. And he started thinking about those two different restaurant owners. One looked at the circumstances outside and made a decision that they could no longer be in business. Another one looked at the circumstances outside and listened to that voice inside that said, "You can do this thing here. Let's try this." And she stepped into that. And when the shutdown is over, one restaurant will be dark forever. The other restaurant not only will have its regular patrons come back and sit down inside, they now have a booming takeout business. And so for us in our world, when we listen, we have an opportunity to do things that we wanted to do and were afraid to do, or we get an opportunity to do things that we had never thought about before. When our heart is open to God's grace, we have guidance. I want to tell you another story. This story is about a 10-year-old little girl who decided that she wanted to be of service to other children. That she had so much, and there were so many children who had so little, particularly those children who were in shelters. And so her birthday was coming up, and she told everybody in her birthday around her that what I want for you to do, don't give me a gift. I want you to buy art supply kits or give me the money to purchase art supply kits, because I want to take these kits and I want to give them to children that are in our local shelter. So her venture established 40 art supply kits in her life, and she and her mom went out and they distributed them to the local shelter. But guess what? It didn't stop there, because that 40 kits, those 40 kits turned into 1,500. And this young woman has distributed art kits to youngsters in the shelter homes and in foster homes across 5 states. And she says that her dream is to make sure that every child in the world who is experiencing hardship will receive an art supply kit that will help them make it through whatever difficult time they're in. Now, guess what? I say that we just need to keep listening, because that young woman is going to start a foundation. And in 5 years, we will have a foundation that distributes art supply kits around the world. And that's because she is standing in her creativity and has been listening to God's guidance. One of my favorite scriptures, Psalms 32 verse 8 says, I will instruct you and show you the way to go. And I will counsel you with my eye on you. So as we are trying to figure out what to do and how to do it, if we get still and quiet, that power and presence that I call God's grace, it's going to direct us and show us the way to go. And then while we're going down that road, it's going to counsel us simply by being present in our life. Last month, I talked about going through open doors, so going open doors and going through them. Today, I'm talking about an open heart. But there's also another analogy about a door. I was telling a friend of mine last week that sometimes we'll go up to a door, we'll turn the handle, and it won't open. And we'll do everything in the world to open that door. We'll go get a chisel, try to, open it that way. We'll kick on it. And then when the door doesn't open, we start blaming ourselves, or we start blaming people around us. Maybe that door is not opening because that is not the door you're supposed to be stepping through. Maybe Spirit is saying, I have another door over here. You said you want a joyous, happy, and free life. And in your intellect, in your thoughts, you have said it's on the other side of that door. But I'm saying to you, no, it's on the other side of that door. And I want you to go over there. And I want you to open that door. We can only hear that voice when we have allowed, like I said, that chatter that's constantly going on in our mind, when we have lowered the volume. That's when we get to hear. I want us to ponder a couple of questions this morning. Are you thinking like the restaurant owner at Betty's Barbecue? Or are you thinking like the other restaurant owner? How is your mindset affecting your well-being? A lot of us are experiencing major physical challenges, major emotional, mental challenges during this period of time. And it has to do with our mindset. How is it affecting your well-being? What hidden assumptions are sabotaging your joy and your happiness? Are you saying something is true and it may not be true? Are you listening to many different videos and shows and people telling you all kind of information, and you never sit down and get quiet enough so that you hear the message that's there for you? What creative ideas would you act upon if fear, anxiety, worry, and self-doubt were not cluttering your mind? There might be something amazing right there for you, and you can't see it because of all that clatter, that chatter, that noise internally and externally that's drowning out Spirit's voice. Our intellect is always telling us information. And I believe that we complicate our lives when we spend time trying to logically figure out something that's got a spiritual base to it. Instead of just sitting quietly, opening our hearts and listening, we go off running down the road, down a pathway. I had another friend share with me some stories out of her life about what happened when she was faced with difficult times. She was saying that the first recession that she went through, she almost lost her house. She lost her job, and her her employer didn't pay into social unemployment, so she couldn't get unemployment benefits. So she would eat popcorn for dinner. She did not drive her car to conserve gas. She only drove it when she went on a job interview. And this one time, she went on a job interview at CBS for a children's programming show. There were 399 applicants, and she didn't get the job. She said, but she was so excited that she had got called for an interview. The next time, several years later, she went through the same thing again, only this time she was a self-employed owner of a florist. And she said in 1 month, she lost 50% of her customers. Once again, she almost lost her home. She said, but it was her faith and knowing that the circumstances were not going to last forever that helped her to get through. And she said the same thing is going on with her today. No matter how difficult it gets, or how difficult the circumstances around her in the world look, she says, I know it will change. And I know that I will get through it, and we all will get through it. My question today is, how are you going to get through it? Are you going to get through it peacefully, knowing where you're going, receiving direction from God to get there? Or are you going to be frantic and worried and upset the well-being in your life? Nelson Mandela used to say this, I love it. I never lose. I either win or I learn. We can learn from everything that's going on around us right now. We can learn from it. And we can win. Marianne Williamson, she also has a quote that I really, really like. I'm not going to read the full quote. I just want to read this small part. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. Our light sometimes is unfamiliar. We've never seen it before. It's never manifested like this before. And so we become afraid of it, and we don't want to step into it. Whereas our darkness sometimes, unfortunately, is very familiar to us. It feels comfortable. It's inside of our comfort zone. And so sometimes we stay there when we don't really have to. There's another story that I want to share with you. This story lets us understand that even inside of our deepest pain, God's grace is available to us. And our creativity can benefit the world and benefit ourselves. In India, there is a very small town that's surrounded by a ridge of mountains. I mean, it's isolated. And there was no road that led from that small town to the next town 35 miles away. It was just completely isolated. And it was a farmer. He was working his farm one day, and his wife was bringing him food. She slipped down, hurt herself. And because there was no road, they could not take her to seek the medical care that she needed. And so she passed away. She passed away from a condition that if she was able to get to a hospital, they would have been able to help her. His grief was so deep. He decided that he would follow what his heart was saying to him. And his heart was saying that no one else should have to suffer this way again. You can do something about it. Now remember, he's in this little bitty town, and they don't have any power tools, they don't have any electricity, and he took a hammer and a chisel, And he started cutting a path through 35 miles of hard terrain, jungle. He started in 1960. Now, people started laughing at him and talking about him and saying that he just needs to stop what he's doing because it's never going to work. It's going to take him forever to do what he's trying to do. It didn't take him forever. He completed in 1982. So it took him 22 years. Nobody came to help him. He had no power tools. But he created a path from his little village to the next town so that whenever anybody needed support in his village, they had an easy way to get to it. After his death, the government finally decided that this little town was worthy enough to have a formal paved road. And so on the path that he had carved out, they went and they created a paved road. That one person made a difference to a whole village. And he did it out of his pain and anguish. Listening to God's grace. God's grace pours over us in good times and in challenging times. And it gives us direction that we need to move forward. So I say to you, in these times that are challenging, we have God's grace here for us. You don't know what to do? You don't know how to do it, when to do it? Sit quietly and you'll get the message. Now, sometimes we may fall short of the standards that we hold for ourselves. That's okay. We may forget that we are powerful divine beings that has spiritual strength built within. That's okay. We might allow our minds to convince us that we are separate from spirit. That's okay too. Because embracing God's grace, which is our birthright, will put us back on the pathway that is best for us. It will lead us through our mountain paths. It will give us the way to open the door that's best for us. All that's available to us when we simply open our hearts to God's grace. Now, you don't have to go out of your house to be of service. You can say a prayer for the world sitting right in your house, and it makes a difference. You can write a note, drop it in the mail to someone. That makes a difference. You can send an email to someone. That makes a difference. You can just sit quietly and give thanks for all the blessings that you have in your world. And you are doing a great service to yourself. So I say, as we face all of the unknowns coming in the days, the weeks, the months, let us step forward together with an open heart, receiving God's grace. The grace that is right here, right now. Because when we do this together, we benefit individually, but then we get to create a world that benefits all of us. So this morning, I simply say to you, take a deep breath. When you're nervous and confused, don't know which way to go, sit quietly. Open your heart and allow Spirit to whisper the message that is there for you. Sometimes Spirit will scream the message at you. Either way it goes, the message is always there. So this morning, I want to add a blessing to these words. I want to add a blessing to each and every one of you. And I want to say, have a happy and safe rest of your Memorial Day weekend. Namaste. Thank you.